Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to bring you Grant Writing 101. My name is Tracy Stroud. I'm Investor Services Coordinator for Invest Medicine Hat, and also hosting with me is Mark Keller, Executive Director of Advancement and College Relations at Medicine Hat College.
Hello, everybody.
Mark and I have worked together for many years. Actually, we worked together for 6 years at the college, and during that time, we actually applied for and were successful in quite a few grants. Of course, we didn't get them all, but we did learn a thing or two along the way, and we're excited to share that with all of you today. Also, in our volunteer worlds, both of us have done grant work. Mark, actually, you were mentioning earlier that you just completed one yesterday, correct?
You bet. Yesterday night or last evening, I finished a grant for the volunteer organization I participate with.
Perfect. So it's fresh in our minds. I also have sat on review panels for grants as well. So a couple different areas that we'll be able to talk to today. But first, a few housekeeping items. So we are recording today's session. That's so that we can use it as a learning tool after the event, but just so you are all aware, we will stop recording for the questions. And speaking of questions, we ask that you please hold your questions until the end. If you can also put them in the chat function, that would be greatly appreciated. We will try to get to everyone's questions, but if we do not, then we have a record of that question, and because we receive everybody's email that registered today, we'll be able to follow up with your question at a later time if we can't get to it over the lunch period. We're also going to be sending out materials such as the slides and some of the PDFs that you're going to see in this presentation. So if you've registered for this event today, you're going to get those materials after. And finally, just one more thing before we go forward. If you can please mute your microphones if you have not done so already and are new coming on the call.
Great, thank you, Tracy. My little role here is to tell you that the event today is brought to you through collaboration. Both the city and the college are part of a group known as Invest Southeast Alberta. That's an informal partnership dedicated to joint economic action. We share resources, we share time, and we take action to try and support the region that we serve collectively. One of the recent collaborations through that group is the Business Retention, Expansion, and Workforce Development Project, known as BROOD. And in the fall of 2019, a very large community survey was done with 476 local businesses participating. And one of the items that was identified through that survey was that access to capital and funding was something that would support our businesses in a better way. And if you fast forward through COVID-19, the access to capital and resourcing challenge has not changed at all. In fact, it may have been amplified. So with today's session, we're hoping to provide information that will help businesses and other organizations access funding through grants. And the way we're going to do that is just a little introduction to the basics of grant writing.
Right now, due to COVID-19, all levels of government are putting out grants to stimulate the economy. But that is what grants are. They are an effort to stimulate the economy. In most cases, that's what they are used for. We should note, though, that every year there are grants that go unused. So today we want to help our local businesses be more successful in acquiring grants by going through the following topics. So we're going to speak about basic information about grants, ways to take action, tips on applying for grants, mistakes you can avoid, and then we have some templates, tips, and tools that we're going to share with all of you to make things easier, and finally a list of grant sources.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. So if you look at our little graphic there, the idea here is to think realistically about the expectations that you will have with achieving a grant. The empty wallet, if you're looking for money to help pay existing bills, you're probably going to be less successful than if you think about innovation or growth or change, or the wonderful word we're all using these days, pivot. Grants are often designed to pursue a future that is different than what you're encountering today. Government grants in particular provide access to public services, stimulate the economy. So with COVID-19, we are expecting grants to appear, perhaps more frequently even than now, to support recovery efforts and innovation and research. There will be, of course, many programs unrelated to COVID-19 that will continue. It's important to know as I said, what to expect. It's really not free money to pay existing bills. You should be thinking about growth or change or something that you want to do that is different than what you're doing right now. Perhaps adopting a new component to your business, putting new technology in. You might find access to grants that will help fill that bill, so to speak. It's also important to know that when you accept a grant, you're really committing to the project. So when you accept grant funding, you're also accepting, in many cases, new work to complete the project and get it done. Certainly, there will be progress reports, and almost with a guarantee, there will be a need for a final report. We have found, as we've gone through the grants that we've worked on, that you can't predict the future. You might start down a path aiming for a particular target and discover that it's not possible. We feel that it's very important to be transparent, to go to your funding source, describe the problem that you're encountering, and share your challenges. Often a grant can be modified based on that transparency, and it's ever so much better than having a surprise when you hit the end of the project and a grant funding report that you really can't complete.
So that relates to our next section, and that is what is finding grants. So I've seen a lot of people actually just get overwhelmed on this first step. For example, I recently researched grants available for Alberta businesses, and there were over 150 that I found, and that was in my first initial search. So there's quite a few that are available. The good news is that you don't need to go searching for grants line by line like I did. For example, canadabusiness.ca is actually the federal site, and they've recently modified it. So before you would have to go through the different grants available, but now if you are a business owner, you can actually put in your information, what type of company you are, and what type of funding you're looking for assistance with, and they will actually send you a list of grants tailored to your specific needs. Or sorry, the website will further tailor it to your needs. Now, for those of you who might not be the best with technology, because I've already gone through the process of grabbing some of those grants that are available for local businesses, I'm also happy to share a customized list. So at the end of this webinar, we're going to be sharing our emails, both Mark and I. And if there's something in particular that you're looking for, if you send me an email with a bit of information about your company and what you're looking to do, I will send you back a customized list so you can take that next step forward. So to give you an idea, I want to show you the 3 levels of government grant sources that are available right now to help provide businesses with support due to COVID-19. Now, please note, governments are not the only ones who do grants, but they are some of the more common ones and the more publicly accessible ones. So these governments have started with their COVID relaunch efforts as well. So before it was for emergency, and now we're getting into relaunch and opening. That money is available. For example, the city has recently announced Medicine Hat Business Innovation Grant, or BIG. It's a partnership with Community Futures, and it provides up to $15,000 for PPE and other related items. It's a very simple grant. It's one that should take you about an hour to apply. So if we'll be sharing that link at the end of the session, but please be aware that it is there for you. And then these ones here, these are the main sites for regular grants available for business from the 3 levels of government. So again, I'm not going to go through all these because we're going to send them out to all of you. So you don't have to worry about writing them down, but just so you get a feel for the type of information of grant sources that is out there. Finally, if you don't want to go through the different listings, there also is a new tool that we've recently launched. Investment in Medicine Hat has created Funding Fridays. It's part of the Brood Initiative, but you can look for that hashtag Funding Fridays on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook to find the latest announcements on grants and other capital available in our region.
So the next part is obviously the question, do you fit? As Tracy said, there are a lot of grants out there, and as we implied a little bit earlier, it takes time and effort to apply for the grant, and you're certainly going to put time and effort into the project that the grant will fund. So one of the really good things to do at the beginning is to look at the grant funding options that you have, look at the criteria, think about your project, and ask yourself if you do really fit. You want to find something that truly aligns with your business goals, or frankly, you maybe end up putting a lot of time into a project that doesn't move your organization forward the way that you like to. It does also take time to write the grant. Generally, the more money that the grant is worth, you're going to find that the grant application gets more complicated and the longer that it will take you. One thing that is really worth your time is to ask questions up front, to do a little bit of analysis, look for the application, and see if you can align your business to the criteria offered by the grant.
And one more thing just before you start actually writing for the grant, and it may not be top of mind, is that if you can work with partners, suppliers, even competitors, it can be a really strong positive for your grant. Even if you decide you just want to do it alone, many grants will seek letters of support to validate what you're doing. And so it can be a really good way to distinguish your application against others. Governments really like to see collaboration. And so if you do go down that path, and I think it's a good one when you can and when it makes sense to, make sure you allow for more time, however, because anytime you're working with additional partners or need some of those additional letters of support, you need to give people time to write those. All right, so now you've decided on what grant you're going to apply for and you're ready to write. To help organize your thinking, we've actually prepared a little cheat sheet. It's a tool that we're going to show you in just a few moments. But first, we want to cover some writing and applying basics. So for me, one of the first things, even before I start writing, is I grab a cup of coffee, but that's just me. Mark's going to take you more into the specifics of how to get ready.
Well, actually, I did work with Tracy for 6 years, as you said, and I think you did coffee with everything, didn't you, Tracy? Not just grant writing,
Yeah,
just a
pretty much.
possibility. So here's a word for you, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I think we all remember that word came from in our childhood. It's a very long word and it sounds kind of impressive. You don't need those words for your grant writing. It's a wonderful thing. Tracy and I attended a grant session once, and this is something that you'll find that the grant people do, is they'll actually provide information sessions on the funding that they provide. The person in that section actually said something along the lines of, the people who read these grants are
Is that
not
ham,
rocket
Randy?
scientists. The implication that that person was telling us is that the reviewers for grants may have less technical information than you do about your business.
I
So
can hear
when
both.
you
I have
write,
mine on.
you want
But
to
they're
write
slightly out of
simplistically
sync, so
and you
they're not
want to
exactly
keep
the same.
things clear.
No, it's
So
fine.
in so much as in your business, you're thinking about a value proposition, you're thinking of what the same thing with a grant. Why should somebody care? What is the purpose of the grant? What are you going to accomplish? What change are you going to make? And you want to use clean, clear language. Bullet points are actually quite perfect for a grant application. You don't need to be thinking about writing an essay or a thesis. Strive to get your point across as clearly as you can. The other thing that you're going to find with many grant applications is there are specific word counts. The form is often electronic. It will limit the number of words that you can use. So you do need to be quite clean and concise with the language that you use. We found several times that what works for us is to take the question from the grant application form and just use a simple word processing tool like Word, take the question, write your response, and that will give you the capacity to do both spell checks and word counts. Then we simply cut and paste and go back to the grant application. One of the beautiful things with that is that you then end up with your Word document. Often that will store information that you can use for your next grant application if you're pursuing that kind of direction. If you have a free range, you don't need to get exotic with fonts. Something clean and simple and easy to read is great. And for proofing it, really think about your grade 9 niece or someone in junior high. Can they understand what you're talking about? Again, the reviewer may not have your level of technical knowledge and expertise and almost certainly won't understand your business as well as you do. Make sure that you're getting those points across clearly. And finally, you want to watch for errors. Many of the electronic forms will not have a spell check or a grammar check. What you write is really your expression of credibility, so it's worth the time to do a double tool, write separately, copy and paste into the grant application. And finally, deadlines. Please know them and please meet them. So I guess that's where I finished off, and it's where we'll start again. This is our top 10 tips. Time. Knowing the deadlines is absolutely critical. One thing, for example, it's easy to think that I might have until 4 p.m. on a Friday. So I think, okay, I'm going to set aside Friday afternoon to get that grant done, only to discover that there's an obscure piece of my corporate registry that they need. They're looking for a quote. They're looking for a letter of support from a partner. Giving yourself lead time in front of the deadline is absolutely critical. And one thing that we've done for our organizations and certainly for the volunteer groups that I work with, I create a tip sheet with all the corporate registry information, all the addresses, all the contact information, so I can quickly cut and paste and not do searching when I am getting close to deadline. Sometimes I do, I admit it.
Well, that leads us to our number 2 tip, and that's to keep it simple. And I think we've alluded to this already in the presentation, but remember to write for a general audience. The more straightforward, the better. Bullet points are encouraged, and so is white space. Relay information and quickly and effectively, that's what you're looking for.
Outcomes. Grants, as we said, are often looking to show some kind of change or transition. It helps to think very much about that transition rather than the steps to get to that transition. It helps to work backwards, in fact, from the outcomes. And when we show you our little grant application tip sheet, you'll see what we mean.
Number 4 is tell a story. And so if you're a good storyteller, if you can craft a compelling case for your organization, it's really going to help you stand out against other grant applications. And also remember that less is more. Be to the point and avoid run-on sentences.
Solutions are so much better to talk about than problems. I admit that in my natural writing style, I'll often talk about a problem rather than a solution. So an example there is, here's a problem statement. Grass fires cause millions of dollars of damages each year because there are no products to detect flare-ups. Well, that's a problem statement. I could provide a solution statement. Early detection of grass fires through the new product that we're developing will help sustain the economy in our region. So I'm just doing a shift in the outcome and the positive of my solution rather than stating the negative. That's a much more encouraging thing to deliver to a grant source.
Number 6 is capacity. So be sure to show your organization is capable of taking that grant. So if they ask you to provide background information on staff or volunteers, that's actually your tip that they want you to show your people are capable of implementation. Also note the new project will almost always create new work, so plan to manage that in advance.
Coupled absolutely with capacity is your budget. You need to make sure that your budget makes sense and that it's easy to follow. You also should double, triple, quadruple check your numbers to make sure that they add up. Often you will need evidence to support your claims with grants, and that might be something like a quote. Certainly when you get to the reporting stage, you're going to be expected to have receipts for the costs that you've encountered. One thing we found in the past, and less so, is that some grants allow for administrative expenses, and that's essentially acknowledging that you are taking on new work as you work through the project. I think the highest we've seen, Tracy, is what, about 15%?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's relatively rare. So, the nice concept there is if you get a $500,000 grant, you can expect some reasonable administrative expenses to help you go through the process of the grant. Unfortunately, that's really quite rare, and many grants will offer no administrative expenses whatsoever. So you want to be clear and confident in your numbers so that you've given yourself appropriate latitude to get the project done.
I would think too that admin fees are something that's slowly going away. So something that you shouldn't count on anyways with a grant. So number 8 is say thank you. So this is a way to show the fund how the funder will be recognized. So you might be thinking of doing that, and you might actually do that, but a lot of people forget to put that in their application, and it can be a real plus if you do. Even if the grantor gives you minimal requirements, also show in the application how you will do a little bit extra, and that will help you stand out.
Great. That's so good, Tracy. It's there's that saying about everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten with the please and thank you, and the same goes forward into the world of grants. Details make a difference as well. Every detail makes a difference. Those word counts make a difference. Spelling makes a difference. Grammar makes a difference. If the grant source is competitive, and you will see often in announcements that there's finite amount of money to go around, if you want to be competitive for that resource, please take the time to avoid mistakes, because sometimes they can just take you right off the list and make you ineligible from the get-go.
And that leads us to check and check again. So recruit an objective reviewer. Better yet, have multiple people review your application so that you know for sure it makes sense. This can be as simple as engaging your mentor or your neighbor, just anybody who's going to give you an honest feedback.
Great. And then here we are with checking and editing, and we have what, 11 for our top 10 tips? It's worth saying, quality control, check again, check, 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 check. That's why it's number 11. Make sure that you're hitting deadlines, do your proofing, do the editing, and make sure you have the documents that need to go with your submission.
Now I want to talk about some mistakes you can avoid. We've alluded to some of these already, but I just really want to hit the points home. So avoid industry words and jargon. So not all industry words are common to all reviewers. I've attended different grant training sessions, and reviewers actually usually come from all walks of life, not a specific industry, even if it's that industry that you're applying for. So if you have to use an acronym, make sure you spell it out. Do not assume that the reviewer will know what you're talking about. And then also avoid ornate language and weasel words. So again, I've seen it in a lot of applications where people say things like, we're going to improve our customer efficiency by using innovation. Okay, well that's good, but what exactly are you going to do and how are you going to do it? So better there is to say things like, we're going to increase customer reply rates by 25%, and we're going to use a customer relationship management system to do that. So people that are reviewing it have a better idea of what exactly you're going to do to make that happen. Also, avoid lack of measures. A lot of times too, people say, well, we're going to make things better. Well, how do you know? How do you know at the end of the grant that it is better? So you need a way to measure it. So this can be through surveys, or this could be a firm measurement, such as we're going to increase revenue by 10%. That's our better. So make sure you're putting in more specifics rather than just vague terms and ways to measure it. Finally, procrastination. So when I attended a grant training center for some training, and I apologize, I've got some
It's not
sirens in
too
the
bad.
background.
The police car's going by. It's all good, Tracy.
Perfect. They were telling us that with those, there's studies out there that show that those who apply early are usually ongoing more successful than those who wait for the last minute, just because they've gotten everything in, and usually they're more accurate with their submissions if you can do it early. So again, do not wait where possible. And then avoid adding unnecessary attachments. So more is not better in this case. Reviewers are usually reading hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. So adding extra information for them to read, it really doesn't help. So get your point across with less, because that really is more.
Can I give you a favorite set of weasel words, Tracy? Empower
Please.
our valued resources to engage in innovation and shift the paradigm. Sounds vaguely impressive, but it's so vague it means nothing from a grant world.
So true.
That's my problem when I write.
So there's a lot that we're talking about here: organizing your thoughts, organizing your information. But what Tracy and I have done is we've created a little planning tool, and actually we're going to do a live example and see if we can create a basic grant request based on the information that we're providing and some information that we're going to do. It's a little bit like a television show of improv, but shall we go ahead and do that, Tracy?
You bet.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. And with any luck whatsoever, what you're seeing is a little grant worksheet that we have created. So Tracy, I'm going to consider you to be a business person. So what's your current business?
So I currently have a tour business in Medicine Hat.
Awesome. So what are you trying to do with your tour business? Where do you want to go into the future, Tracy?
Well, I want to expand my operations, and actually my specific goal would be to increase revenue by 25% by providing whale tours down the South Saskatchewan River.
Okay, increase. Okay, I just need to type this out. To increase revenue in my existing tour business by adding whale tours on the river. That's pretty good.
This is a fictitious
me?
example. I said, obviously, this is a fictitious example, but
Yes, but it works for me. So to work this out a little bit further, you're going to increase revenue by how much did you say?
I'm aiming for 25%.
Okay, thank
So
you.
a lot.
Cool. Okay, so Tracy, we're going to be trying to push a little bit further to achieve that outcome of increasing your revenue by 25% by offering whale tours. What do you need to do? Give me 3 steps that you need to take.
Okay. Well, I need to have additional tour equipment.
What else do you need to do?
I need to do promotions.
Okay, what else do you need to do?
And I need to cross-train and add on a few more staff.
So if you're watching along, and hopefully you'll be able to see it, our little cheat sheet here, we've got our revenue goal at the top, or our project, and we've given ourselves 3 objectives, and those are just moving down 1 level. So Tracy's first goal, need to have additional tour equipment. I'm going to be a little bit more specific again and say, Tracy, break that down for me. What do you need to do to get your additional tour equipment?
So I have 1 boat already, but I need another to expand to get to my 25%. So I'm going to need another boat there.
Okay, so when do you want to do that, Tracy?
Well, I know this grant is a quick turnaround, so I'm applying now. So I expect to hear in July.
Wow, July this year, that is a fast turnaround time. I should tell people right now that we've applied for a grant that is actually still 3.5 years from the original date, and we don't have an end yet, but we're optimistic. Who's going to be buying that boat?
So I'm going to buy that boat.
Okay. And what's the expected outcome when you acquire that boat?
I'll be able to increase the number of tours.
Yeah, I said double. Is that accurate enough?
You bet. Yeah.
And what's the evaluation of that going to be?
So I'm actually going to evaluate that by the number of extra tours I'm able to have, right? So
I'll just call it number of additional tours?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So the next part is purely investment. Tracy, what are you going to put into this part of the project?
So I've got some dollars to put towards this. I just can't do the whole thing. So I've got the boat's going to cost $10,000, and I've got $7,500.
Okay, you've got $7,500. So does that mean you're asking for $2,500?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we're just going to work through this final objective, or this one objective. What else do you do once you've acquired that boat? You need to have the additional tour equipment. Is there anything else that you need to do there? Or do you want to move straight on to promote the new tours?
You know what? Why don't we jump down to the 3rd one just to give.
Okay.
So we're not doing all of them, but we're still giving a good example of how it all fits together. So I need to have some additional staff, and I need to.
So what do you need to do to accomplish that?
I'm going to hire 2 additional people.
Okay. When are you going to do that, Tracy?
So I'm going to do that in August.
Okay, that sounds good. Who's going to be doing that?
So I'm going to be training them there.
Can I call you the owner?
Yes, please.
Okay. What's the expected outcome once you've hired those staff? What are you going to find? What's going to be different?
So that also will allow me to engage more people onto the tours. So it's one thing to just be having them. I want to max the number of people on those tours, and you really need someone who's charismatic and can do that. And I also have to keep my existing company going. My existing tours, I don't want to let them go. So they need to be cross-trained there too.
And the evaluation, how would you tell if you're successful?
And so I'm actually going to evaluate that there by the number of people on the tours, and repeat clients.
Okay. And how are you going to achieve this? What's your investment going to be?
Well, in this case, I'm giving a lot of in-kind.
What's in-kind? Tracy, explain it to me.
So in-kind is not a financial contribution that I'm giving, but it's something that I already have that I'm offering towards this initiative. So in some cases it can be time, so my time to train these people in this example, but it also can be existing equipment or specialized skills or even my own staff's time that can go towards this. So it's anything that I'm not giving a cash contribution to, but it still is going, there's efforts going towards that grant.
Great, thank you. And actually, as a point of illustration, many grant application forms will ask about cash contribution and in-kind contribution. In this little tool, we've just lumped them together. But what do you think the value of your in-kind contribution will be, Tracy?
So I've got to train 2 staff, and I'll also be to get them up to speed to where I want them. I'm thinking about 5,000.
Okay, and are you going to be asking for any grant funds to achieve that?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to ask for some. I know there's some funding available to hire students, and that's where I'm going to start. So I'm going to
hire
ask,
college students, Tracy?
You bet I am. So I'm going to request 10,000 for that because it's just for the summer.
Okay. So as you'll see with our little tour sample here, Tracy's given us a specific goal. She wants to increase her revenue, and then we've broken that down into objectives. And if we kept playing this game, we would end up with pretty good information about how Tracy is going to achieve that business goal. And we've simply created a capacity to look at her investment and look at the grant funds and just give quite a simple total and of where we're at. Now, we're not suggesting that this tool will magically solve your grant funding or grant writing challenges, but we feel it's a good way of organizing your thinking. So as you start to get into your grant, you've got a skeleton to pin things to. And as Tracy said, we're happy to share this by email at the end of the session. Good luck with the tour business. I hope to see the whales.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm just going to share my screen here again. So we hope that helped to help focus your thoughts when you're writing a grant, but we know that writing is not everyone's forte. So there are some other solutions that can help. So if you are like, I don't want to write this, you can hire a grant writer. I don't recommend this unless it's for a more lengthy, in-depth grant. The simple ones, I do believe everyone can accomplish themselves. With the grant writers as well, there is a cost to that, and they're still going to need some of your time. So be aware of that when you're making that negotiation with that grant writer, that how much time are you going to need to put in and to still make that grant successful, because they are going to need your input to help with that. Another option is you can actually write a draft of your application and send it to the Grant Training Center. So they charge a small fee to review your grant and provide comments. And of course, you want to give some time when if you're using that option, because they have to get it back to you before the deadline. So keep that in mind as well. And another option is use your network. Find out who's in your community that can help. Sometimes, as Mark already alluded to, there is the granting organization that also puts on sessions that are specific to their grants. So attend those too when you can. All right, you did it. You wrote the grant, you applied, and you found out you were successful. So you're ready to sign, but should you? And the reason we wanted to bring this up is that we want to make sure that people are aware, once you sign, it is a legal document. So if you break the terms, there can be repercussions. So make sure you know what you're signing and you're able to deliver on what you're signing. And also, more common is sometimes by the time you've applied and hear back from the grant, things might have changed. There can be quite a lengthy process in there sometimes. Some grants are a quick turnaround, but many are not. And so if something's changed and you can't deliver on that before you sign, talk to the grantor and see if you can make that adjustment and still go forward. Again, much easier to do that ahead of time than doing it after.
Great. So finally, after all this work, you're at the project. This is actually the exciting point. You're getting to do what you set out to do when you wrote your grant. Please don't get so excited that you forget to keep your records and sustain the information that you need both to manage the project as it goes and to report at the end. So in Tracy's example, I'd want to see probably the quotes for her new boat. I'd absolutely want to see the receipt for her new boat. I would like to see the hours committed to training, and I might actually need to see evidence of how much I've paid my new staff and how I recruited them. I might even need to see email exchanges between Tracy and the conservation officers to find out if she's allowed to deliver her whale tour project on the South Saskatchewan River. All of these records are really important to keep. I think one thing I've learned is keep them in a separate and secure location. It might be as simple as a shoebox to go that direction, or if you keep common files, because chasing for this information when you're getting to the deadline of writing a report can be pretty darn tedious, and having gaps can be problematic. If you don't have an invoice or a receipt, you might actually lose your opportunity to get the funds for that particular project.
Yep.
We have also found on occasion that there can be a lopsided feeling in the way the grants work out. We've had on occasion 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks for an answer to a question that we pose to the grant funding agency, and we'll get an answer on a Friday afternoon at 2 that says, and thank you kindly, the deadline is at Friday afternoon at 4. Well, the obligation on that, my case, is then to complete the process despite the deadline. There will be on occasions when it feels a little bit lopsided.
And that leads us to our next point, and that is reporting. I know we've touched on this multiple times throughout the presentation today, but it's so important. So in my volunteer world, I've actually seen where someone took all the time to write the application, did everything they were supposed to do, but just did not submit that final report. And so they didn't get their final payment. And I just felt so bad for that organization because they did so much work to get there. So make sure that you are reporting. Many grants will hold back some dollars, but some don't. Some just give it up front. If that's the case, you still need to do that final report, because if you ever need to go back to that grant funder, they're going to have record of that you didn't do your final report, and it may stop you from getting funding in the future.
Actually, I mentioned at the beginning that I was working last night on a grant application for my volunteer world, and there were a series of questions at the end. Have you completed reporting? Do you owe any funds? Those things make a significant difference if you're looking for future grants. Thanks, Tracy.
And that actually leads us to the end.
So if you do want to pose a question, by all means, use the meeting chat, and we'll do our best to respond verbally to the question that you type. Beyond that, Tracy will move the screen forward one notch, and you'll see our email contact information there. Again, we would collectively do our best to answer any questions, and these slides will be provided to you, as well as our tip sheet and the grant sources that Tracy mentioned, by email at the end of the session.
And just before I stop recording, I also want to let people know that if you do go out and you get a grant and you're successful, please let us know that as well. We'd love to promote that, promote your success and tell that story as well.